It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Matthew has a question. It's his first time posting a question, so welcome, Matthew, to the live stream. He says, I have 3 children, ages are 6, 5, and 3, and I'm trying to decide what would be the best way to set up their future. Should I do their own brokerage or college fund? Thanks in advance.
Yeah, so we get this a lot. You know, when it comes to kids, what's the financial order of operations? Do I say for college accounts first? Do I do UTMAs first? Do I do this first? Let me give you the best gift that you can give your children when it comes to setting them up for success is setting a good example for how to make sound financial decision making. And unfortunately, this flies against our own human nature. With our children, we have to prioritize ourselves first. We have to make sure that we are on firm financial footing before we start thinking about building up custodial accounts or Roth accounts. It's why saving for college comes much, much, much later in the financial order of operations. It is not a step 1 or 2 thing. It's a much later thing. Because just like when you get on an airplane, they say you got to put on your oxygen mask before you help others. Your financial situation is the same way. So the first question I'd ask you, Matthew, you got these 3 young kids, 6, 5, 3. How are you doing from a financial standpoint? Are you checking all the boxes you need to be checking, from risk management all the way to accumulation, all the way to savings rates? If you're not doing those things, start prioritizing those. Figure out how to get those things in check. So now, let's assume you've done that. Let's assume that you've hit all of those and you're now in hyper accumulation, and now you're moving on to step 8, prepaid future expenses. Now you're trying to think, okay, I want to start building for my kids. Do I use college accounts? Do I use UTMAs? Do I go, start putting money in a coffee can? What's the best way to think about building assets for our kids?
I'll put the disclaimer. We don't know all of Matthew's scenarios, but I do find because of how turbocharged they've made 529s, once you get to step 8, that's a powerful one, because 529s, if you remember, these things originally came on the scene. You put money in them. You can only use it for college. Which was great, but then in some basic education expenses, but they've expanded. Now you can use it K through 12 private school. You can use it for trade schools. I mean, these 529s are really powerful in the way that they're also flexible, because even at worst case scenario, your kids don't go to college, they don't go to trade school. You can get access to the money. Your principal is always going to come back to you directly, but you only go pay income taxes and a penalty on the gains only. And remember, if you have the positive, if your kid goes to college and they get a scholarship, whether it's athletic, academic, if you can pull the money out of the 529 and you'd only pay the income taxes, not the penalty. If you were getting reimbursed for something that your kid, you didn't even have to pay for college anymore because they had a good thing happen to them. So I actually like kind of prioritizing the 529, just because aspirationally, I think we all kind of hope that once we take care of our retirement, how do we make sure our kids are equipped for the next stage? And even if you're starting, because with the student loan deal that's going on right now, a lot of us are starting to question, what are colleges thinking with what they're charging? But there's going to be some need for additional skill sets, whether it's the community college down the street or whether it's just encouraging your kids to make the right major choices at the big university or the trade schools and some other things. 529 is going to work for every one of those scenarios. So I would kind of prioritize that. Custodial accounts kind of come into play. I can tell you, and I have 2 daughters, and I was nervous about, wedding costs and other things. So in addition to 529s, because I was already doing strong enough in step 8 that I had a little bit that I could put on top before, and I was under 45, didn't need to start prepaying my mortgage yet. I did start custodial accounts. I think I was putting, $150, $200 a month into their 529s, and then I started doing $100 a month in the custodial accounts. And so there's nothing wrong with having both, but if you ask me which one's coming first and you twisted my arm, I'm probably going to lean on the 529 first.
And then again, I think the last thing I'll say, just because I'm in the same spot, right? I got kids that are around the same age as yours, almost the exact same age. Start teaching them about money the best you can right now so that they are familiar with it, so they learn about it. One of the things that's been great for me is Brian has a daughter who's just left the nest, right? She's out in college now. She's basically an adult. And it's wonderful seeing the financial decisions that she's making now because she had that firm foundation. So when I sit here with my young kids, I think, man, I hope that I teach them the way that money works. I teach them how to defer gratification. I teach them how to make wise financial decisions. That's going to be way better than me just giving them a $50,000 account when they turn 18. If I can teach them how to go out and make the kinds of decisions to build that, they're going to be so much more well served with that information.
Last thing, just Matthew, you're a financial mutant. Give them some scarcity in their life, you know, because this is just if you're successful and you're building wealth for your family, just let's try to create that fire within them too. That's why I do love, and I practice this with my oldest daughter. When it was time for her to start driving, she had to pay for half of her car. So she bought a car that was, now look, I had this whole dilemma is I could afford to go stroke a check for a car that had the latest and greatest safety features, but I let her buy a 12-year-old car, you know, that didn't have the latest and greatest safety features. That's actually, I've been impressed. She was home the other week and I noticed, you know, I put a backup camera because the car she drives has horrible blind spots on the back of it. So I put a backup camera. Well, that thing hadn't worked, she said, in 6 months. But yeah, she's doing good. She knows, I think she's a better driver.
Because she didn't have the backup
because
camera.
she didn't have some of those crutches that we all take for granted now. But it's I know it's a dilemma, but I love that, you know, look, I want to give my kids the best life possible, but I also need them to have a hunger for life. And I worry about when you're wealthy, you can ruin your kids if you're not careful. That scarcity, you know, look, I'm not, because Bo and I both come from humble beginnings, and I think sometimes when you look at the stats on wealth creation, scarcity of your childhood can actually be a desired difficulty. I know that sounds so contrary because everybody who's poor is like, man, rich is so much better
Sounds
than poor.
better, yeah.
But I'm just telling you, if you can create some type of scarcity in your kids' life so they at least appreciate and respect what a dollar is, you'll probably be happier, because that's another thing about the Millionaire Next Door. When you go through all those, I think it's the 7 traits and things, having successful adult children is a big part of your future success. So create that scarcity while they're young, so that hopefully you don't create some tyrants when they get older.